We introduce you to one of those heroes whose war service is the stuff of legends, with books and movies, but not nearly enough to tell all the story.
James McNasty McNiece served in the American Army during World War II.
Well, I'm not a hero, I'm just a survivor.
McNiece's unconventional methods earned him the nickname Filthy McNasty from his guys. He frequently defied superior officers, but defended his actions by arguing that men were killed because they listened to a stupid lieutenant.
Were you a troublemaker?
I was a troublemaker.
Join us as we look at the secret soldier the U.S. was afraid to send to war. 1. Filthy 13. The Filthy 13 was the name given to the 1st Demolition Section of the Regimental Headquarters Company of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, 101st Airborne Division of the United States Army, which fought in the European campaign during World War II. This unit inspired the 1965 novel and 1967 film The Dirty Dozen. 2. Jake McNasty, McNiece, the man behind the mayhem. Jake McNiece was a member of the Filthy 13, a group of men who served with the 101st Airborne Division's 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment in World War II. The Filthy 13 was to infiltrate Normandy ahead of other D-Day assault units on June 6th and carry out sabotage by breaking bridges, preventing the Germans from replenishing their beach positions. Jake McNiece and the rest of the Filthy 13 stood out from the other 101st Pathfinders not only because of their mission, but also because they shaved their heads in a Mohawk style and painted their faces like Indian warriors. They were also assigned to the Regimental Headquarters rather than a Pathfinder company. Early life. James E. Jake McNiece was a Maysville native who spent most of his life in Ponca City. He graduated from Ponca City High School, where he lettered in football 3 years and was the senior class president. In 1942, he volunteered for the Army and received paratrooper training, eventually becoming a Pathfinder for the famed 101st Airborne Division. His first combat jump occurred in Normandy, behind German lines and inland from the D-Day beach landings, where he participated in demolition operations. A second jump occurred in Zaan, Holland, where he assisted in the liberation of communities that had been held captive by the Germans for 5 years prior. He helped clear a path through a German minefield. He made another combat leap at Prüm, Germany, providing airborne resupply for General Patton's 3rd Army. McNiece was a member of the Filthy 13, a voluntary suicide demolition team that inspired the film The Dirty Dozen. His civilian career in Ponca City lasted 26 years in the U.S. Post Office, where he helped establish a federal employees credit union and served as president for a few years. For 10 years, he served on the Ponca City Welfare Board, which oversaw the city's emergency relief agency. He frequently lectured to school groups, service clubs, veterans organizations, and other groups about his paratrooper experiences during World War II. Most people who heard him left with a renewed appreciation for America's liberties and a clearer understanding of the sacrifices made to protect them. Thumbnail. In our thumbnail, we can see Jake McNasty McNiece with his famous war paint on his face, and I must say, it is impressive. Imagine coming face to face with such a warrior. It's enough to frighten anyone. 3. Military career troublemaker. McNiece volunteered for military service on September 1, 1942. He was assigned to the Demolition Saboteur Unit of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment. This unit became known as the Filthy 13, and it was first led by Lieutenant Charles Mellon, who was killed in combat on June 6, 1944, during the Normandy invasion. Following Mellon's death, Private McNiece led the unit. McNiece's deliberate disobedience and scorn throughout training kept him from being promoted beyond private, although most paratroopers were promoted to private first class after 30 days. McNiece would work as a section sergeant and first sergeant on several operations. His first sergeant and company commanders recognized him as the regiment's wartime leader. His adventures are documented in his novels The Filthy 13, Fighting with the Filthy 13, and War Paint. The Filthy 13 jumps into Normandy. McNiece made 4 combat jumps during World War II, the first occurring during the Normandy invasion in 1944. In the same year, he took part in Operation Market Garden in the Netherlands, which was depicted in the novel A Bridge Too Far and the Siege of Bastogne, part of the larger Battle of the Bulge. He was a demolition platoon sergeant while fighting in the Netherlands. He volunteered for Pathfinder training, expecting to spend the rest of the war in England, but his squad was tasked with jumping into Bastogne and guiding resupply drops. His last jump occurred in 1945, near Prüm, Germany. In recognition of his natural leadership abilities, he was assigned acting First Sergeant of Headquarters Company, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, toward the end of the war. McNiece was discharged from the Army in February 1946 after a final fight with MPS. The birth of the Dirty Five. For more than a century, popular culture has centered on World War I. Sam Jefferson, a singer-songwriter, was inspired to create songs about the war after viewing a portrait of his great-grandfather Jim Marshall during his military duty. Sam's song, The Dirty Five, is about Jim and his Barnsley Pals battalion adventures, particularly their participation in the Battle of the Somme. Following training, the five lads joined the Barnsley Pals battalion. They fought together until 1916, when they participated in one of military history's most devastating wars, the Battle of the Somme. Jim Marshall was born on June 10, 1894. His grandson was born on July 6, 1994. However, he realized a few months ago that they are almost exactly 100 years apart. It continues to stun him that Jim and his comrades were fighting in the trenches at the same time. These would be their last days together. Jim informed his grandson that after being forced to retreat from the front lines, he and 4 friends were injured by a German mortar attack. One boy was slain shortly, and the other 2 were never found. The birth of the legendary paratrooper. Theodore Hermann Bachenheimer was an American soldier. In just 3 years, he was known as one of the war's most daring reconnaissance scouts. Martha Gellhorn befriended the legendary paratrooper, also known as the GI General. Private Bachenheimer possessed great combat skills, but he was also a peacemaker. He stated he was opposed to all warfare and couldn't dislike anyone. Lieutenant General James M. Gavin, who was well regarded by his fellow combatants and remembered by high-ranking U.S. Army authorities, once said of him, "His bravery was, without a doubt, of the highest order." Bachenheimer struck out more for the risks he made with his bold approach than for his bravery. He chose to fulfill the mission he started, no matter the cost. Bachenheimer, one of the division's most well-known characters, died at the age of 21. After being arrested by German soldiers and imprisoned in a POW camp, Bachenheimer bravely escaped from his boxcar at night with 3 other Allied soldiers. They waited for Bachenheimer at the lines, but he did not show, and most likely leaped further north between Harderwijk and Nunspeet. The Germans recaptured Bachenheimer for the final time somewhere between Niekerk and the village of Tharde, most likely to re-establish communication with his resistance organization. According to local stories, 3 gunshots were heard as a Wehrmacht truck came to a stop on the Epper in Edharde, in front of the De Lange family's home. Later that morning, the German commander of a nearby army base ordered the local municipality to remove Bachenheimer's body off the base. His body bore 2 bullet wounds, one in the neck and one in the back of his skull, both of which were fatal. Bachenheimer's body contained several belongings, including personal papers, dog tags, suspenders, his gold wedding band, and a silver ring engraved with the inscription, "I love Holland." A memorial stone commemorates the place where he was most likely shot. However, no verified eyewitness reports have been identified, and the moments and motivations that led to Bachenheimer's death remain unknown. The birth of the Filthy 13. The 1st Demolition Section was assigned and trained to act as demolition saboteurs, destroying enemy targets behind enemy lines. The unit, led by Sergeant Jake McNiece, had a strong objective focus, but the leader's disregard for military discipline components that did not contribute to their purpose proved to be their doom. The 13-man squad got the nickname Filthy 13 while living in Nissen huts in England, refusing to bathe for the entire week to utilize their water allotment to prepare wildlife poached from the surrounding manor instead. Photos of the lads sporting Native American-style Mohawks and applying battle paint sparked public interest in their squad. McNiece, a Choctaw Indian, provided the inspiration for this. During the Normandy invasion of Europe in June 1944, the group was airdropped alongside the 3rd Battalion, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, by aircraft from the United States Army Air Force's 440th Troop Carrier Group. They were instructed to secure or destroy the Douve River bridges. Half were killed, wounded, or taken during the leap, but the remaining survivors, led by McNiece, achieved their mission. Because most of the 3rd Unit leadership had been killed during the jump, higher authorities judged that the unit had failed its mission and directed the Air Force to bomb the bridges. The Filthy 13 also helped capture Carentan. During Operation Market Garden, the demolition platoon was entrusted with defending 3 bridges across the Dommel River in Eindhoven, the Netherlands. The German bombing of the city killed or wounded half of the demolition platoon's personnel, and McNiece was promoted to platoon sergeant for the remaining members. Jack Womer assumed his position as section sergeant. For the rest of the battle, the demolition men protected the regimental command post or wire-laying details. Half of the original Filthy 13's surviving members joined McNiece's Pathfinders, intending to spend the remainder of the war training in England. To their surprise, they parachuted into the besieged town of Bastogne at the peak of the Battle of the Bulge. Even though the 20 Pathfinders were supposed to lose 80 to 90% of their numbers, they only lost one. Their CRN-4 beacon enabled them to guide subsequent airdrops of supplies, which were essential to the 101st Airborne Division's continued fight. McNiece finished the war as the acting first sergeant, and with 4 combat jumps, a rare feat for an American paratrooper. His combat jumps included Normandy and the Netherlands as part of Operation Market Garden. The Pathfinder jumped into Bastogne during the Battle of the Bulge and serving as an observer with the 17th Airborne Division during Operation Varsity. Jack Agnew once remarked of the Filthy 13's activities that they weren't murderers or anything, and they didn't do everything they were supposed to do in some ways, while doing a lot more than they wanted them to do in others, and they were constantly in trouble. Battle of the Bulge. The Battle of the Bulge, also known as the Ardennes Offensive, was the last major German offensive assault on the Western Front during World War II, lasting from December 16, 1944 to January 25, 1945. It was launched via the thickly forested Ardennes region that connects Belgium and Luxembourg. The operation was designed to halt Allied usage of the Belgian port of Antwerp and to disrupt Allied lines, allowing the Germans to encircle and destroy each of the 4 Allied armies, forcing the Western Allies to negotiate a peace accord in favor of the Axis powers. The Normandy Jump. The Normandy landings were the landing operations and airborne operations carried out by the Allied invasion of Normandy during Operation Overlord on Tuesday, June 6, 1944. Operation Neptune, popularly known as D-Day, was the most massive seaborne assault in history. The operation began the liberation of France and the rest of Western Europe, setting the framework for the Allies' victory on the Western Front. The planning for the operation began in 1943. In the months leading up to the invasion, the Allies carried out a huge tactical deception known as Operation Bodyguard, which misled the Germans about the date and location of the main Allied landings. The weather on D-Day was bad, therefore the operation had to be postponed 24 hours. A further postponement would have resulted in a 2-week delay because planners had to account for the moon, tides, and time of day, which meant just a few days every month were deemed ideal. Following the amphibious landings, an airborne assault landed 24,000 American, British, and Canadian airborne forces shortly after midnight. At 6:30, Allied infantry and armored divisions began landing on the French side. The 50-mile stretch of Normandy shoreline was separated into 5 sections: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. Strong winds pushed the landing craft east of their intended destinations, particularly in Utah and Omaha. The Marines landed under heavy fire from gun emplacements overlooking the beaches, and the shore was mined and littered with obstacles like wooden stakes, metal tripods, and barbed wire, making beach-clearing teams' duties difficult and perilous. The biggest number of casualties happened in Omaha, which featured towering cliffs. The Allies failed to achieve any of their goals on the first day. Carentan, Saint-Lô, and Bayeux remained in German hands, and Caen, a key objective, was not captured until July 21st. Only 2 beaches, Juno and Gold, were linked on the first day, with the remaining 5 beachheads not connected until June 12th. However, the operation acquired traction, and the Allies gradually expanded it over the following months. German casualties on D-Day are estimated to be between 4,000 and 9,000 men. Allied casualties were estimated to be at least 10,000, with 4,414 confirmed fatalities. A wild bunch. The Dirty Dozen was a box office hit, but it was partially inspired by a real-life War II paratrooper regiment. Jake McNiece commanded the group, whose acts influenced the 1967 film and gave them the moniker the Filthy 13. McNiece died at the age of 93. While the Filthy 13 took liberties, the real McNiece was as colorful as Major John Reisman, depicted by Lee Marvin. He saw himself as the head troublemaker among a group of troublemakers, or the Wild Bunch as they were also known. On the eve of the Normandy invasion in 1944, his forces jumped behind German lines. Some called it a suicide mission. McNiece shaved his head and painted his face for the D-Day jump, which was warmly received by his teammates. So he began clipping their hair and painting tattoos on their faces to conceal them. It was a morale booster, and it frightened both the Germans and the French when they landed in France. After D-Day, McNiece helped resupply troops during the Battle of the Bulge, among other arduous missions. He received 4 Bronze Stars, 2 Arrowhead Bronzes, and was designated a Knight of the French Legion of Honor. Mohawk and Warpaint. Airborne Division units displayed paratrooper-specific qualities and cultures. The Filthy 13, for example, were excellent at this. They were not the Dirty Dozen, as Hollywood would have people believe, nor were they a group of death row inmates recruited as hitmen. In the film, they struggled for personal independence. If they completed and survived their mission, they would be acquitted of all criminal charges and not executed when they returned to the States. Real men fought for freedom, but they were the selfless heroes who battled for the freedom of others. These young men aspired to be part of something bigger than themselves. They discovered what they were looking for in the airborne, and while they were not criminals, they were able to build their own paratrooper myth based on their young section's actions. After presenting them with the fake story about scalping, McNiece stated to his section that he had read that lice in warfare was awful and convinced his friends that shaving the sides of their heads would be a safeguard against the lice. While the cut was probably unneeded in retrospect, it was extremely beneficial to the unit's morale. It also showed that many of the soldiers in the airborne units remained youthful at heart. The conflict forced these young men to mature quickly. After the section got new haircuts, Jake McNiece used fresh, black, and white paint from nearby jets to paint bullseyes on their faces. It was another morale booster that eventually made the Filthy 13 renowned at home. While the section was busy applying war paint, the Army Signal Corps cameramen present took advantage of the opportunity to film and record the ceremony. Holding the bridge. Following the airborne jump into Normandy, the Demolition Section performed admirably under difficult circumstances. They met their primary goal of maintaining a bridge on one of the causeways near Utah Beach. The Filthy 13 held off Germans occupying the bank on the other side of the bridge, acting as a shield for the invading force on the beach. They continued to work as a demolition section in Holland. Operation Market Garden. From September 17 to 25, 1944, the Allies carried out Operation Market Garden in the German-occupied Netherlands. Its purpose was to carve a 64-mile salient into German territory, complete with a bridgehead across the lower Rhine River, to create an Allied assault route into northern Germany. This was to be done in 2 sub-operations: the capture of 9 bridges by joint US and British airborne forces, followed by the rapid movement of British land forces across the bridges. The 1st Allied Airborne Army led the airborne operation, while the British 2nd Army's 3 X-Corps led the land campaign. Over 41,000 airborne soldiers were dropped in strategic areas to capture key bridges and hold territory until land forces arrived. The land forces consisted of 11 armored and motorized brigades, each with a comparable number of soldiers. The ground forces arrived from the south, along a single road surrounded by floodplains on both sides. The aim was to travel 64 miles from their starting point to the Rhine Bridge in 48 hours. Approximately 100,000 German soldiers were stationed in the area to fight the Allied onslaught. It was the largest airborne operation of the war until that moment. McNiece awarded the French Legion of Honor Chevalier class. The National Order of the Legion of Honor, previously known as the Royal Order of the Legion of Honor, is France's highest military and civic order of merit. Napoleon Bonaparte established it in 1802, and all subsequent French administrations and regimes have continued to use it. In 1997, historian Richard E. Kilblane began documenting Jake McNiece's oral account of his wartime exploits, which he published as The Filthy 13 in 2003. Jake became an immediate hero among World War II airborne enthusiasts, and he toured the United States and Europe, educating and entertaining future generations with his wartime stories. McNiece was named a Chevalier of the French Legion of Honor in 2012. He passed away on January 21, 2013, at the age of 93. While membership in the Legion is legally limited to French citizens, foreign nationals who have served France or the ideas it represents may be granted the distinction. Foreign nationals living in France must meet the same conditions as French citizens. Foreign nationals living abroad may be awarded any rank or dignity in the Legion. Foreign heads of state and their wives or consorts of monarchs are appointed Grand Crosses as a courtesy. American and British servicemen who served in either World War on French soil or during the 1944 battles to liberate France may be eligible for appointment as Chevaliers of the Legion of Honor if they were still alive when the honor was authorized. The Filthy 13 from the Dust Bowl to Hitler's Eagle Nest. Since World War II, the American public has been aware of the heroics of the 101st Airborne Division, the paratroopers who led the Allied assaults of Nazi-held Europe. But among the ranks of the 101st, a subunit achieved legendary notoriety at the time, and its reputation has endured among veterans for decades. The Filthy 13 rose to prominence because of the Dust Bowl and the Depression, even within the elite 101st. Never one to salute an officer or take a bath, this unit became known among the Screaming Eagles for its heavy drinking and ferocious fighting abilities. And that was just in training. Just before the Normandy invasion, a Stars and Stripes photographer captured U.S. paratroopers with shorn heads and battle paint on their faces. These guys, unknown to the American public at the time, were known as the Filthy 13. After parachuting behind enemy lines in the midnight hours before D-Day, the Germans tasted this unit's reckless spirit. Only now the troops were fighting with Tommy guns and explosives rather than bare knuckles. The 13 sustained tremendous casualties while serving as the vanguard, with some troops being injured and others being blown up. By the conclusion of the war, 30 men had been through the squad. Throughout the war, the Filthy 13's heart and soul remained Jake McNiece, a half-breed Indian from Oklahoma, who was the squad's hardest member and helped shape its character. McNiece did 4 combat jumps and was at the forefront of every engagement in Northern Europe, although he never reached the rank of PFC. The survivors of the Filthy 13 remained together until the Allies finally defeated Nazi Germany. Jake McNiece was a special soldier, and what he accomplished during the war was incredibly brave. Which one was your favorite? Why don't you let us know in the comments below? Well, that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give us a like and let us know in the comments what you think. Check out our other videos and subscribe to be part of the fun. Click on the notification icon so you can see our new videos as soon as they're uploaded. Thank you for watching and see you next time.